15 years of friendship ended with one call to the police. She left her daughter at my house for just 1 week, and flew to Bali to find herself. But when her daughter nearly died from an overdose, she didn't come back. Instead, she called the cops, on me. That was the moment I realized, our 15-year friendship didn't end with a fight. It ended with a police report. Some friendships are soft beginnings, casual, accidental, born of convenience. Ours was not. Claire stormed into my life in 10th grade like a hurricane in combat boots. She sat next to me in biology, uninvited, and by the end of class had declared we were best friends. I didn't object. Something about her energy was magnetic, chaotic but certain, like she knew exactly where she was going and would drag you along whether you liked it or not. She was the first person who came to my house just to talk, not because of a project or sleepover. We'd sit on my bedroom floor surrounded by records and empty Coke cans, dissecting the universe like it was something we could eventually conquer. She made me laugh until I snorted and never once judged me for crying about things I couldn't name. We grew up like vines twisted around the same trellis. We went to the same college. Got apartments 2 blocks from each other. I was there when she met Jason, who became her ex-husband 3 years and 1 baby later. She was there when I miscarried my second child, when I almost didn't come out of it. We used to joke that even if our romantic lives went up in flames, we'd always have each other, our fallback person, the one you could call at 3 a.m. with mascara streaks and your heart in pieces. She was my, if I go missing, contact. My emergency babysitter. My emergency everything. There's a specific kind of heartbreak that comes from losing someone who isn't dead, just changed. Someone who once sat on your couch eating mac and cheese out of the pot, who now watches you through narrowed eyes like you're a stranger trying to steal something that was never yours. And the worst part? You never see it coming. When Claire called me that Monday morning, the sound of her voice immediately told me something was off, not in the frantic, overwhelmed way I'd heard before, but in that dreamy, ungrounded tone she only used when she was trying to convince herself she was okay. "I need a break," she said. Like a real one. Not a bubble bath while my phone buzzes with school emails. Not a pedicure with Julia sulking outside the salon. I mean a break where no one needs anything from me. She laughed at herself. I sound like such a cliché, don't I? She didn't. She sounded tired. I listened. I always listened. She told me she'd found a last-minute retreat in Bali, a spiritual cleanse with yoga, journaling, and something about sound bowls and plant-based healing. It was a week long. She'd already booked the flights. She just hadn't figured out the Julia part yet. "You're the only person I trust with her," she said. "She loves you. Emma too. It'll be easy." Easy. That word would haunt me. I hesitated for all of 2 seconds. My own daughter, Emma, adored Julia. The two of them were only a year apart in age but had always bonded like sisters who skipped the fighting stage. They shared playlists and inside jokes, spent whole nights designing outfits for imaginary fashion shows, and spoke fluent sarcasm. Julia had even started referring to our guest room as her second bedroom. So I said yes. Of course I did. I told her to drop Julia off the night before her flight. I'd help her pack if she needed. I'd make space in the closet. I'd buy extra snacks. I offered more than she asked for, because that's what you do when someone you love is unraveling and asking you for scissors instead of thread. "Just a week," she repeated. 7 days. Then I'll be back and refreshed and ready to face the chaos again. We laughed about it. Made jokes about coconuts and detoxing from reality. She promised to bring me back something ridiculously spiritual from the retreat gift shop. A crystal or incense or a woven bracelet that came with a guilt trip if I ever tried to throw it out. But after we hung up, I remember staring at the calendar and getting this strange, inexplicable chill. I told myself I was being dramatic. I had no way of knowing then that in just a few days, I would be sitting in an emergency room holding Julia's lifeless hand, whispering prayers into the static silence of fluorescent lights. The first few days went exactly as expected, peaceful, even. Julia fit into our routine like she'd been living with us for years. She and Emma spent most of their time in the upstairs loft playing music and arguing about which streaming show was superior. They took over the kitchen one night to bake a triple-layered chocolate monstrosity that somehow caved in the center but still tasted like heaven. Julia documented every step with blurry photos and captions full of emojis. It was the most I'd seen her smile in months. She was always like that, quiet in big crowds, loud in safe corners. Claire used to complain that she couldn't figure her out, like Julia was some complex device with a missing instruction manual. I, on the other hand, never saw her as difficult. She was observant. Sensitive in a way that made adults uncomfortable because she could sense moods before they were voiced. She never asked for much, but when she did, it was always genuine. A hug. A break. A moment. On the third night, I found her curled on the couch beside Emma, watching an old animated film with subtitles on. Both had popcorn in their laps. Julia looked at peace. And then, somewhere around the fifth night, everything shifted. It started small. She didn't come down for dinner. Emma said she wasn't feeling great and had gone to bed early. I made her a plate anyway, thinking she'd get hungry later. The food stayed untouched. By morning, I noticed her shoes were still at the door. Her phone was plugged in on the kitchen counter, an unusual habit for a teenager who guarded it like a limb. I checked the guest room, quiet. Too quiet. I knocked once. Then twice. No answer. My heart rate ticked up. I called her name, louder this time. Still nothing. Something primal inside me took over. I went to the hall closet, pulled out the key we kept for emergencies, and unlocked the door. The air in the room was too still. No sound. No movement. Julia was lying on top of the bed covers, pale as porcelain. Her arms were folded over her stomach, and around her were 3 empty pill bottles, spilled like dropped marbles. Next to her was a notebook, closed. A pen, uncapped. Her face was eerily peaceful, like she'd fallen asleep to escape something she couldn't outrun. For one terrifying second, I thought she was dead. And then, thank God, her chest moved. Shallow. Faint. But there. That's when I screamed. Emma came running up the stairs. I shoved the phone into her hand and told her to call 911. My own hands were shaking too badly. I kept touching Julia's forehead, her pulse, whispering, "Stay with me, sweetheart," over and over like a mantra I believed would work better if I said it fast enough. The sound of the ambulance pulling up was the loudest silence I've ever heard. I stood at the front door, barefoot, waving my arms while Emma sobbed into the phone with the dispatcher still on the line. The neighbors peeked through blinds, drawn by the flashing lights and the sick tension that always lingers in the air when sirens visit your street for reasons other than fire drills or community fundraisers. The paramedics rushed past me, calm but fast. Professional. Efficient. One of them, a woman with silver streaks in her bun, gave me a quick nod of reassurance that felt anything but reassuring. Inside, they moved around Julia like clockwork. Oxygen mask, blood pressure cuff, vitals. One of them picked up the pill bottles, studied the labels, and scribbled something on a clipboard. They asked me if I knew what she took. I said no. I said she was fine last night. I said everything felt normal until it wasn't. And then the question came. Where's her mother? That's when the shame curled up in my throat, hot and defensive. Bali, I said. She's at a retreat. I'm just her friend. The medic blinked. Friend of the mother. I nodded. They exchanged a look I couldn't decode. She'll need to be contacted, they said. Of course she would. But first, I needed to make sure Julia didn't stop breathing on the way to the hospital. I rode in the front passenger seat of the ambulance. Emma stayed behind with our neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who brought over a blanket and a thermos of chamomile tea I never drank. I kept glancing into the back of the vehicle where Julia lay, looking impossibly small on that enormous stretcher, tubes already snaking from her arms, her skin still that terrifying shade between white and blue. The medic in the back whispered something to the driver, and I heard the word, stable. Not out of the woods, but not dying. I closed my eyes, just for a second, and tried to breathe. The kind of breathing I taught my daughter after her panic attacks. 4 in, 7 hold, 8 out. But all I could hear was the hum of machines. And under that, the sound of my heart breaking, not just for Julia, but for the woman I thought I knew, who left her daughter behind to chase peace while Julia was clearly at war. The emergency room was ice cold. Every surface felt too clean, too sterile, like grief had no place there. I sat next to Julia's hospital bed, hands clenched so tight I left crescents in my palms. A thin monitor beeped steadily beside her, almost mockingly calm. That's when I made the call. It was 4:17 a.m. Bali time. I didn't care. Claire answered on the third ring, her voice groggy and annoyed. I heard waves crashing in the background, the unmistakable ambience of oceanfront indulgence. "What's wrong?" she asked, not unkindly, but not urgently either. I took a breath. My throat burned. "It's Julia." A pause. "What about her?" "She overdosed. Pills. We don't know how many yet. They're working on stabilizing her. She's here. In the hospital." But it was close. I expected crying. Shock. Panic. Anything. What I got instead was silence, then a long exhale. "Jesus. Are you sure it wasn't just for attention?" The way she said it, low, distant, like she wasn't talking about her daughter but a minor inconvenience, made something deep inside me crack. I didn't answer. I didn't know how. She continued, "Did she leave a note or anything?" "Yes," I whispered. "But I didn't read it. It's hers. For now." There was another pause. "I mean, she's dramatic sometimes. You know that." I closed my eyes. I could still see Julia's limp body under fluorescent lights, still hear Emma sobbing from the hallway. "You need to come home," I said quietly, trying not to shout into the phone. "She needs you." Claire sighed. "I can't just leave. The retreat's not refundable, and I'm already halfway through. Besides, it's probably better if she gets a little space, right?" That was when I hung up. Not out of rage. Not even shock. Out of something colder. I finally understood that the woman on the other end of the line was not the friend I thought she was. And maybe never had been. I stayed at the hospital all night. Not because anyone told me to. Not because I thought Julia would wake up right away. I stayed because I couldn't bear the thought of her opening her eyes and seeing no one there. Of her reaching out and touching air. I sat in that uncomfortable plastic chair, one hand resting lightly on her wrist so I could feel her pulse. With every steady beat, I whispered thanks to no one in particular. I promised things, to her, to myself, to the ceiling, that I wasn't even sure I could keep. "I'm here. You're not alone. You're safe now." The nurse came in every hour or so to check her vitals, adjusting things I didn't understand. At one point, a doctor with deep-set eyes and a clipboard asked if I was the legal guardian. I said no. He frowned. "And the mother?" "Bali." He didn't say anything else. Didn't need to. At 6:12 a.m., Julia stirred. Her fingers twitched. Her eyes fluttered but didn't fully open. She mumbled something. I leaned in. I thought I'd disappear. I don't think she meant for me to hear it. But I did. And I broke. I didn't cry loudly. Just sat there with silent tears rolling down my face, because what do you say to a child who thought death was the only way to stop hurting? You hold their hand and you stay. That morning, I texted Claire again. No response. Instead, she posted a story on Instagram, a photo of her feet buried in warm white sand, captioned with "Disconnect to reconnect. Sun with face sparkles." I turned my phone face down on the bedside table and swore I'd never forgive her. Claire flew home 2 days after Julia was discharged. Not because she'd had a change of heart. Not because she finally realized her daughter almost died. She came home because Child Protective Services had opened an investigation and, voluntarily returning, looked better than being ordered to appear. I knew she was back before she knocked. She pulled into my driveway in her white SUV, tires crunching against gravel. She got out of the car like it was a school pickup, oversized sunglasses, a too large designer bag slung over one shoulder, phone in hand. I opened the door before she rang the bell. "Where is she?" she asked. No greeting. No apology. Just demand. "She's resting," I said, stepping aside to let her in. "She barely eats. Cries if she hears loud voices. Doesn't want to talk to anyone. Including you." Claire rolled her eyes. "God, you make it sound like I caused this." I didn't answer. She walked through my living room like she owned it. Her eyes scanned the walls, the dishes in the sink, the pile of laundry by the couch. The way she looked at my home told me everything. I wasn't a friend. I was competition. An intrusion into her perfectly curated narrative. When she finally walked into the guest room, Julia's room, now, I followed behind slowly. Julia was sitting on the bed, back against the headboard, knees pulled to her chest. She looked smaller than usual, shrunken in her own skin. "Mom," she said flatly. Claire forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Hi, baby. I'm here. Everything's going to be okay now." Julia blinked. Said nothing. Claire sat on the edge of the bed, too close, brushing hair from Julia's face. Julia flinched. That tiny movement broke something in me. "You left me," Julia whispered. Claire froze. I needed rest. I needed a mother. For a moment, no one said anything. I wanted to leave the room. It felt wrong to be there. But I didn't trust Claire alone with her. Not yet. Claire stood abruptly and turned to me. "I think it's time I took her home." "Absolutely not," I replied, steady as I could manage. "That's not your decision anymore. She's my daughter. And she nearly died under your care." The silence between us was suffocating. She stormed out of the room without another word, her heels clicking like a metronome of resentment. Later that night, I heard Julia crying quietly. When I went to check on her, she didn't ask for her mom. She asked me to sit beside her and read. So I did. I should have expected what came next. 2 days after Claire's visit, the doorbell rang at 8:23 a.m. I was still in pajamas, sipping lukewarm coffee, Emma still upstairs, Julia wrapped in a hoodie at the kitchen table picking at dry toast. 2 uniformed officers stood at the door. Not aggressive. Not hostile. Just official. "Are you Ms. Ramirez?" one asked. "Yes. We received a report alleging that a minor is being harbored here against parental consent. We need to speak with the minor, and the mother, Claire Douglas, is waiting in her vehicle." I blinked. "She called the police?" He nodded. "We're just here to check on the well-being of the child." I stepped aside. "You can speak to her, of course. But she's not a hostage. She's recovering from a suicide attempt, and her mother, your complainant, left her in my care while she was on vacation. I have messages. Discharge papers. CPS is already involved. One of them made a note on a pad. The other nodded. Understood. Can we speak to her privately? I led them to the kitchen. When Julia saw the badges, her fork clattered against the plate. Is she making me go back? I squeezed her shoulder. No one's making you do anything today. You just talk. That's all. They spoke to her gently, to their credit. They didn't pressure her. Just asked how she felt, what happened, and if she wanted to leave with her mother. No, Julia said firmly. I don't. They asked why. Because when I needed her, she wasn't there. And she doesn't even believe me. She thinks I made it up for attention. The officers nodded, thanked her, and asked if she felt safe here. Yes. More than I ever did at home. When they left, they didn't take Julia. They told Claire, still parked in her car, arms crossed, sunglasses hiding her expression, that no action would be taken. That custody would remain as is until further notice. Claire didn't come inside. She didn't say goodbye. She backed out of the driveway, tires screeching louder than necessary. That night, Julia and Emma made popcorn and watched cartoons. I didn't join them. I sat on the porch and cried quietly into my coffee. Not because of fear. But because I knew the war had just begun, and Claire wasn't done trying to rewrite the narrative. The court date came faster than I expected. Child Protective Services filed an emergency motion for temporary guardianship based on the incident, the hospital records, and the recorded visit from law enforcement. They advised that Julia remain in my care while the investigation into Claire's fitness as a guardian continued. I remember standing in front of the mirror that morning, hands trembling as I tried to zip up the side of my dress. Not because I feared I'd lose, I had the evidence, the testimony, the truth, but because I hated that we'd ended up here. That a friendship once filled with midnight talks and shared ice cream had dissolved into legal filings and cross-examinations. Julia wore a black hoodie and jeans to court. Her hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, her face washed of makeup. She didn't try to look older or more dramatic. She looked exactly her age. Exactly herself. Claire, by contrast, arrived in a sharp navy blazer and heels so tall she wobbled with every step. Her hair was ironed to glossy perfection, lips painted a color that screamed performance. She walked in like she was on trial for an award, not custody. The judge, an older woman with silver hair and a reputation for zero tolerance toward theatrics, began by reviewing the emergency order and a summary of the case. Then she called Julia to the stand. I held my breath. Julia walked up calmly. Swore in. Sat down. Julia, can you tell me why you don't want to return to your mother's custody at this time? The judge asked. Julia didn't fumble. Because she wasn't there when I needed her. I tried to kill myself. She didn't call. She didn't come back. When she did, she called me dramatic and said I was just trying to get attention. The courtroom was quiet enough to hear the hum of the ceiling fan. And how do you feel now, living with Ms. Ramirez? Safe, she answered, voice steady. Scene. Then came Claire's turn. Her lawyer painted me as manipulative. Said I'd poison Julia against her mother, out of jealousy. That I inserted myself into a role that was never mine to fill. But when asked for proof, anything to support the claim, she offered only screenshots of out-of-context texts and a grainy photo of Julia at my kitchen table smiling with Emma. No threats. No drama. Just teenage girls being teenage girls. Then the judge asked Claire directly, did you leave the country while your daughter was under your care? She was with a friend, Claire replied, chin up. She was safe. She's just emotional. The judge didn't flinch. Did you attempt to retrieve her through legal channels or cooperate with Child Protective Services before filing a police report? I was protecting my rights as a parent, she said defensively. The judge took off her glasses, folded her hands. Ms. Douglas, this court does not exist to validate your emotional narrative. It exists to protect your child. And based on the evidence presented, it is clear that Julia's physical and emotional well-being is safest in the care of Ms. Ramirez at this time. The gavel came down. Temporary custody, granted. Visitation rights, supervised, pending review. Claire didn't cry. She didn't shout. She just left. Didn't look at Julia. Didn't say a word. And for the first time in a long while, I saw Julia exhale like she'd been holding her breath since birth. The drive home from court was quiet, but it wasn't heavy. It was that kind of quiet that follows a storm, the kind where you realize, for the first time, that maybe the lightning has passed. That maybe the ground is still there beneath your feet, and you're still standing. Julia sat in the back seat, watching the city blur by. I caught her in the rearview mirror more than once, her expression unreadable. When we pulled into the driveway, she didn't get out right away. I waited. Eventually, she spoke. I thought I was going to throw up on the stand. I smiled softly. You didn't. You were incredible. She shrugged, but her lips curled just slightly at the edges. That night, she made spaghetti, her version, which included too much garlic and exactly 0 vegetables. Emma joined her in the kitchen. They played music. Laughed. Emma wrapped noodles around a wooden spoon and declared herself the spaghettisaurus. It was a mess. It was beautiful. Later, while they curled up on the couch with a movie playing and blankets tangled around their feet, Julia leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, "I think I'm okay." I didn't answer right away. Because, okay, wasn't something I'd expected to hear from her for a long, long time. You don't have to be, I said. Not yet. Not fully. She nodded. But I think I'm closer than I've been in a while. That night, I walked past her door before heading to bed. The light was still on. I knocked. Come in. She was sitting at her desk, sketching in a notebook. Music played low in the background, some gentle acoustic track with lyrics that felt like exhale. She looked up. Hey. Thank you. For what? For believing me. For staying. For not making it about you. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Walked in. Kissed her on the top of the head like I used to do with Emma when she was little. You're worth staying for. I meant it more than I've meant anything in a long time. It had been 2 weeks of relative peace. Julia was settling into her new school schedule, her therapist had praised her progress, and even her appetite had returned. She started baking again, banana muffins one day, blueberry crumble the next. The house smelled like cinnamon more often than not, and Emma kept joking that we should open a cafe like I used to dream. Then came the letter. It arrived in a pink envelope, hand-delivered by someone I didn't recognize. No return address. Just my name in looping cursive on the front. Inside was a note from Claire. Not handwritten, of course. Typed. Polished. She never did like the vulnerability of her own handwriting. I would like to request a visitation session with Julia. I understand the conditions, and I am prepared to comply. I believe she deserves a chance to see that I'm working on myself. I've started therapy. I've enrolled in a parental wellness seminar. I'm trying. There was no apology. No ownership. Just a list of efforts, as if improvement alone could erase harm. I called our caseworker, read the note aloud. She was cautious but fair. Legally, we have to allow it, but the setting must be neutral. And Julia has to agree. So I asked her. We were on the back porch. A quiet Saturday. Julia was sipping lemonade and sketching clouds with charcoal on brown paper. She wants to see me, she said, eyes narrowing slightly. Only if you're okay with it, I told her. No pressure. We can say no. She stared at the trees. Thought for a long time. I want to tell her something, she said eventually. I nodded. All right. But supervised. And only if you feel safe. The meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday, at a CPS-monitored visitation center. A beige room with uncomfortable chairs and a clock that ticked too loudly. Claire walked in 10 minutes late. Julia didn't get up. She waited. Claire sat down across from her. Smiled. That old polished, pageant smile. You look good. You didn't come when I was dying, Julia said, voice even. Claire blinked. Opened her mouth, then closed it. You sent police to my safe place, Julia continued. Still, Claire said nothing. You told people I was dramatic. That I was broken. You made it about you. Finally, Claire spoke. I didn't know what to do. You didn't even try. Silence again. Then Julia stood. I hope the therapy helps. I do. But you don't get access to me just because you're trying now. And she left. Didn't cry. Didn't look back. I was waiting in the hallway when she came out. She didn't say anything. Just held my hand, tighter than usual. That night, she slept soundly. No nightmares. Claire called the next day. I didn't pick up. Grief doesn't just disappear. It shape-shifts. Sometimes it sneaks up on you in the middle of a laugh, souring the sweetness. Sometimes it hits in waves, like when Julia caught sight of a mother braiding her daughter's hair in the park and fell silent for the rest of the afternoon. But other times, it fades so gently, so slowly, you don't even realize the ache is gone until you stretch and it doesn't pull anymore. That's how it was, watching Julia begin to live again. She started saying yes to things, small things at first. A weekend art class. A group chat with 2 girls from her new school. Volunteering with Emma at the local animal shelter. I'll never forget the first time she came downstairs in a sundress. She stood awkwardly in the kitchen doorway, waiting for someone to notice. You look beautiful, I said. She smiled, but it was shy. Like the sun coming out from behind cautious clouds. I don't know. It's a little bright. So are you, I replied. She rolled her eyes at that, but didn't change. That same week, she started drawing again, really drawing. Not just sketches, but full pieces. Portraits of people. Soft lines, strong faces. Her therapist said it was a breakthrough. I already knew that. Then came the letter to her father. We sat at the dining room table with mugs of hot cocoa between us. I want to know him, she said. I nodded. I think that's brave. I think it's necessary. Claire had always told her he abandoned them. But the truth was Messier. He'd been pushed out. Manipulated. Lied to. When the letter came back, 3 pages long, shaky handwriting, full of apologies and quiet hope, Julia cried. Hard. But not in pain. In release. They started talking once a week. Short video calls at first. Then longer ones. He never pushed. Always waited for her to set the pace. Sometimes she'd come out of those calls smiling. Sometimes crying. But always lighter. Emma gave her space. Then slowly, wordlessly, folded her back into the safe zone they'd shared. One night, I caught the 2 of them building a pillow fort in the living room like they were 9 again. Julia looked at me from beneath the blankets and grinned. We're not too old, right? Never, I said. And I meant it. Because some parts of us deserve to stay soft. Even after the world tries to harden them. When something like this happens, an overdose, a custody battle, a fallout between families, the world around you doesn't quite know what to do. At first, there's silence. Whispers behind closed doors. Neighbors who used to wave at you in the driveway suddenly looking away. Parents at school who smile a little too tightly. But silence doesn't last forever. Soon, people started asking questions. Some out of genuine concern. Others out of morbid curiosity. Is it true what happened between you and Claire? I had no idea Julia was struggling so much. Why didn't she say anything sooner? I answered when I had the energy. Set boundaries when I didn't. But what surprised me most were the apologies. Not the ones that came too late, but the ones that came quietly, honestly. Claire's older sister, Marion, reached out first. She sent a message through Emma, unobtrusive, respectful. I'm so sorry. I should have said something when I saw the way Claire talked about Julia. I thought it wasn't my place. I invited her for tea. She came with trembling hands and eyes full of regret. Julia was wary at first, but by the end of the visit, she was sitting across from Marion on the porch, sharing memories of her childhood like they were puzzle pieces she was still trying to fit together. Then came Claire's ex-husband, Julia's dad. He'd driven 6 hours just to bring Julia her favorite kind of ice cream, a flavor he remembered from a single birthday party years ago. I didn't fight hard enough, he told me. I thought staying away was the kindest thing, but I see now, it was just the easiest. He stayed for a weekend. Helped Julia build a bookshelf. Played Scrabble with Emma. Fixed the leaky faucet in the guest bathroom without being asked. And then, quietly, began planning to move closer. Even some of Claire's old friends started reaching out, not to defend her, but to admit they'd watched the unraveling for years and hadn't stepped in. She was so good at making herself the victim, one of them said. By the time we realized Julia was actually in pain, it felt like it was too late. But it wasn't too late. Not for Julia. Not for me. Not for the circle of people who finally realized that silence doesn't protect anyone. That speaking up, even awkwardly, even late, is better than pretending not to see. There's a strange peace that comes after surviving chaos, not because life is suddenly easy, but because your definition of hard has changed. Waking up and knowing that everyone in your house is alive and safe becomes enough. More than enough, actually. We fell into a rhythm, not flawless, but functional. Julia started her mornings with tea instead of coffee. She said the bitterness of coffee reminded her of being at home with her mother. Tea was gentler. A soft way to start the day. She took the bus to school with Emma, earbuds in, a sketchbook always poking out of her backpack. At first, she sat in the back. Alone. But over time, a girl named Chloe joined her. Then another, Jess, I think. By the second month, there were 3 of them sharing snacks, swapping lip balm, laughing too loudly about God knows what. I watched from the window one morning as they walked down the sidewalk together, Julia's head thrown back in laughter. I cried. Not because I was sad. But because joy had returned to her in a way that was unprompted. Organic. Unforced. She joined the school's art club. Even entered a citywide competition. Her piece. A charcoal portrait of 2 girls, one holding the other's hand, both standing in front of a door slightly ajar. It's called Threshold, she told me. Because that's what you gave me. A way out. An in. She didn't win, but she got an honorable mention and a feature in the local newsletter. We framed it. Hung it in the hallway across from the bathroom, where it couldn't be missed. Even the way we ate dinner changed. Slower. More present. Phones in the basket by the stairs. Julia started asking about my day before I could ask about hers. Emma created a playlist called Kitchen Vibes, and it played almost every evening while we cooked, sometimes pasta, sometimes breakfast for dinner, sometimes just grilled cheese and too many pickles. They made cookies one night that turned out terrible, and we all laughed so hard we cried. Julia wasn't healed. But she was healing. And that, more than anything, felt like the greatest miracle of all. People always ask me if I feel like Julia is my daughter. I never know how to answer that. Technically. No. She's not mine. She wasn't born into my arms or carried in my womb. I didn't choose her name or her first school or her bedtime storybook. I wasn't there when she took her first step. But I was there the night she nearly took her last breath. I was there when she whispered that she didn't want to exist anymore. When she woke up disoriented and ashamed. When she sobbed and shook and begged not to be sent back. And I stayed. I stayed through the aftermath, through the slow rebuild of trust, through the therapy appointments and missed assignments and panic attacks in the cereal aisle. I sat next to her when she couldn't face herself in the mirror. I waited outside the bathroom door when she needed space but feared being alone. I taught her how to breathe again. How to believe that mornings are worth waking up for. And if that's not parenthood, I don't know what is. Blood doesn't define love. It never has. Consistency does. One afternoon, Julia sat down beside me on the porch with her sketchpad in her lap. She didn't say anything at first, just drew for a while, quiet and focused. Then she spoke. Do you think I should forgive her? I didn't have to ask who her was. I took a long breath, stared out at the wind gently stirring the trees. Forgiveness isn't a gift for her. It's for you. So you don't have to carry what she dropped. Julia nodded, chewing on her pencil. But I don't want to talk to her. I don't want her in my life. That's okay, I said. Forgiveness doesn't require a reunion. Just a release. She kept drawing. I think I'm ready to stop being angry, she said after a while. Not for her. For me. I reached over and squeezed her hand. Then you're already forgiving her. That night, she folded the sketch and taped it inside her closet door. It was a drawing of a girl standing at a fork in a forest path, backpack on, scars on her knees, light pouring from the road ahead. Underneath, she had written. Still walking. Still worthy. It was 3 months after the court hearing when we got the official letter. Claire had voluntarily surrendered her parental rights. No fanfare. No explanation. Just a signed document with legal language and a courier signature. A clean exit in black and white. Julia stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. She read it silently. Then again. Then a third time. Then she folded it neatly, slid it into a folder labeled Past, and said. Let's order pizza. We did. Extra cheese. Pineapple on half. She never cried. Not that day. But later that night, I heard her in the bathroom, letting the grief out quietly, measured, controlled, like she'd planned it. I didn't interrupt. Some storms you weather alone. Not because you're unloved, but because you've learned how to hold your own umbrella. Seasons passed. Julia turned 17 surrounded by friends, art supplies, and a homemade cake Emma tried to decorate but accidentally spelled Happy Birthday. We laughed until our sides hurt. She got her first job at a local bookstore. Bought a second-hand bike with her paycheck. Painted the frame lavender and named it Hope. She and her father began meeting every other weekend. They built a birdhouse together. It was crooked, but every bird on the block seemed to love it. She still flinched when someone slammed a door too hard. Still avoided certain songs. Still double-checked the locks before going to sleep. But she smiled more. She danced in the kitchen again. And sometimes, she'd just hug me out of nowhere and whisper, "Thank you." I always said, "For what?" And she'd say, "You know." And I did. At her school's spring showcase, Julia stood in front of a crowded auditorium and read a short story she had written for her creative writing class. It was about a girl who got lost in the woods. Not metaphorically. Literally. She wandered for days, cold and scared, convinced no one would ever find her. Then one night, she heard singing. Soft. Off-key. Familiar. She followed the sound and found a woman sitting by a fire, stirring soup and humming badly. The woman didn't ask questions. Didn't ask where she'd been or why she was covered in mud. She just offered a bowl of soup and said, "You can rest here, if you want." The girl never left the forest. But she didn't need to be rescued anymore. Because she had warmth. And that was enough. The crowd clapped. I cried. Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if Claire had never asked me to take Julia for that week. What if I'd said no? What if I hadn't been home? But then I remember, love doesn't wait for convenient moments. It shows up, uninvited, and changes everything. Julia wasn't part of my plan. But now, she's the best part of my story. And when she walks across the stage at graduation, wearing shoes she bought with her own paycheck, tossing her cap into the air like it weighs nothing at all, I'll be the one in the front row clapping too loud. Because she made it. Because I stayed. Because she chose to keep going. And because love, real love, isn't about blood. It's about showing up. Again and again and again. This story wasn't just about a friendship ending, it was about how real love can grow from broken pieces. If you've stayed with me until now, thank you. I hope tonight brings you peace. And if you want more stories like this, raw, real, and full of heart, don't forget to subscribe before you drift off to sleep. Good night.